The smell of diesel and burning rubber woke me before the alarm did. My hip ached the way it always did before a change in weather, and for half a second I thought that was all it was, just an old man's joints complaining about a storm coming in. Then I heard my daughter's voice through the wall, sharp and urgent, and I understood the smell wasn't weather at all. "Marcus, the barn's on fire." I got my legs over the side of the bed and my feet found the floor before my mind had caught up to what my body already knew. Smoke was coming under the door in thin gray ribbons. I pulled it open, and the heat hit me like a wall. And standing in the hallway, lit orange from the window at the far end, was my daughter Renee, phone already in her hand, filming instead of running toward me. "Dad, where's the will? Did you move the safe deposit box key?" she said, not to me, but into the phone, to her husband Denny somewhere below. That was the first thing out of her mouth. Not "are you awake? Not "are you safe? The will." I called her name and she looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has wandered into the wrong house, and then she turned and went down the stairs 2 at a time, already gone before I finished saying, "Please, I want to tell you plainly, because I think you deserve the truth of it, and not some softened version. I am 68 years old. I built a feed and grain supply business from one leased warehouse in 1987 into 4 locations across 2 counties in Ohio. And I did it with these hands, and with my wife Colleen's bookkeeping, and with more nights than I can count where we ate crackers for dinner so we could make payroll. Colleen passed 9 years ago from a stroke that took her in 11 minutes flat, faster than I could get from the field to the house. I have thought about those 11 minutes more times than I can tell you. And I had one daughter left in this world who I thought, right up until that night, would have walked through fire to reach me. I found out that night she would only walk through fire to reach a filing cabinet. The barn beam gave way above the tack room just as I reached the top of the stairs, and it caught me across the shoulder and drove me down onto the landing hard enough that the wind left my body entirely. My hip, already complaining, did something I felt in my teeth. I could not get up. I could hear Denny's voice from the driveway, calm as a Sunday morning, saying into his own phone, "No, he's still up there. But the insurance paperwork is in the study. Get that first. We can't lose the policy numbers." 6 words that told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in the order of things that mattered to them. Not me. The paperwork. I lay on that landing with smoke pressing down from the ceiling, and I thought about Colleen, the way you think about a person when your own body has decided it might be done with you. I thought about her laugh, the real one, not the polite one she used for customers. The one that came out when I said something genuinely foolish, which was often. I knocked my fist against the floor because it was the only thing left I could do, 3 times, slow. And I heard my own voice say her name into the smoke like it might still reach her somewhere. The sirens arrived, built up out of nothing the way they do. A thin sound that thickens as it gets close, and then boots on the stairs, fast and sure. A flashlight found my face before I found the man holding it. "Sir, can you hear me? Stay with me." He was young, maybe 32, 33, jaw set, and his name tag read Ostraki. "What's your name?" "Marcus," I said. "Marcus Feld." "Okay, Marcus, I'm Danny. I've got you." He got his shoulder under the beam and lifted with everything in him, and I dragged myself out from under it on pure, stubborn will, the same stubborn will that got a feed business through 2 recessions and a flood in '03. We came out the front door together, my arms slung over him, both of us coughing up half our lungs, and the cold Ohio night hit my face like something almost kind. Renee was standing on the lawn in her robe, the fireproof document box hugged to her chest like a baby. Denny stood beside her with his laptop bag over one shoulder, already on the phone with someone, gesturing with his free hand the way men do when they are rearranging a problem instead of feeling it. Renee looked at me the way you look at something you didn't expect to still be standing. Not relief. Recalculation. Denny glanced at me, then at the document box, then said quietly, to no one, and everyone, "How is he even out here?" I heard those 6 words through the ringing in my ears, and I understood every syllable of them with a clarity the smoke hadn't managed to steal. They loaded me onto the stretcher, and I looked up at a sky gone orange and black at the edges, and I thought, they did not come back for me. They came back for the box. And then the dark took me before I could decide what to do with that thought. I am telling you this. whoever you are listening tonight, because I think somewhere out there is a son or a daughter who has looked at a parent the way Renee looked at me on that lawn. And I think somewhere out there is a parent who has felt what I felt in that moment, which is a loneliness so total it has its own weather system. Stay with me. There is more to this than betrayal. There is a stranger in this story who ran toward me instead of away. And there is a granddaughter in this story that I did not know I had. And there is a promise I made to a woman 9 years gone that I did not know I would get the chance to keep. Tell me where am I listening from tonight, because I read every single word you write me. And this story is for you as much as it is mine. They kept me 3 days at the burn center in Columbus before a specialist in Portland, Maine, agreed to take my case. A man with a reputation for shoulders and hips that other surgeons had given up on. I did not ask why Maine. When you are 68 and the left side of your body looks the way mine did, you go where the good hands are and you try to stay grateful for the flight. What I remember from the transfer is very little. Mostly ceiling tiles and the particular gray light of a hospital that never quite becomes day or night. There was a water stain above my bed shaped almost exactly like the state of Michigan, and I stared at it for the better part of 2 weeks because it was easier than thinking about anything else. Where my mind went, every time the medication let it drift, was back to a county fair outside Dayton in the summer of 1996. A little girl in a blue jumper with her hair in 2 braids, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed soft from years of holding. Her name was Abigail, though Colleen had taken to calling her Bug from the week she was born, because she said the baby moved like something small and determined finding its way across a leaf. I was holding her hand at the funnel cake stand. Colleen had Renee, 3 years old at the time, balanced on her hip 20 feet away. I turned to dig change out of my pocket. 30 seconds, maybe less. When I turned back, the blue jumper was gone, folded into the crowd the way one color disappears when you pour it into too many others. I called her name until my throat gave out. Colleen stood at the fairground gate for 7 hours in case Bug found her way back on her own. She did not. We filed the report. We hung flyers in 4 counties for 2 years. We hired a man out of Cincinnati who specialized in exactly this kind of grief for 3 more years after that, until even he told us gently that some searches do not end the way we want them to. Colleen never stopped believing. She used to sit in the doorway of Bug's old room, kept exactly as it was, yellow wallpaper with little ducks on it, and she would say, "Marcus, a mother knows if her child is gone from this world, and I do not feel that. I feel her somewhere." She said that until the stroke took her, 11 minutes and 28 years of waiting, all in the same breath. Renee grew up in the shadow of a sister she never met. She said to me once, 17 years old, and furious about something else entirely, "You loved a ghost more than you loved me." I did not have an answer for her then. I am not certain I have one now, except to say that grief does not divide evenly, no matter how much you want it to. I was thinking of Renee's 17-year-old face, the one full of a hurt I never learned to fix, when the door to my room opened and a big man walked in, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee, like they were something fragile. "Morning," he said, startled to find my eyes open, then relieved. "I'm Danny Ostrowski. Don't know if you remember." "You got your shoulder under the beam," I said. Something crossed his face between a laugh and a wince. He set 1 cup on my tray table, careful, like it mattered, and pulled the chair over without waiting to be asked. "Had some leave saved up?" he said. "Wanted to make sure you got here all right." I looked at this young man who had followed a stranger to another state on his own time. "You didn't have to do that." "No," he agreed. "But here I am." He wrapped both hands around his own cup. "My wife came with me, Priya, and our daughter, Nora. She's 7. The smile that crossed his face at his daughter's name was the kind a man makes without knowing he's making it. Priya says nobody should sit in a hospital room alone if there's somebody who can help it. She sounds like a good woman. She's the best person I know," Danny said, with the plain certainty of a man telling you which way is north. For 6 weeks, that hospital room became something I did not expect. Danny brought coffee and read the sports page out loud whether I answered or not, because he said silence in a hospital is a different animal than silence anywhere else, and filling it gently was just a kindness he knew how to give. Priya came in the afternoons, quiet in the particular way of someone who thinks before she speaks and means it after. She brought food in containers she stacked in the little fridge, not hospital food, real food, and she never once asked if I'd eaten it. If I had, she said nothing. If I hadn't, she said nothing and came back the next day with something new. It was Nora who broke through what nothing else could reach. 7 years old, her mother's dark eyes and her father's directness, she showed up one afternoon holding a carton of orange juice in both hands like it was something precious. "Mom said I could bring you this," she announced. "It's the real kind, not the powder kind." She climbed into the chair beside my bed without asking and looked at my leg, wrapped and elevated and impossible to ignore. "Does it hurt?" Every adult who'd asked me that in 6 weeks asked it braced for the answer. Nora asked it the way she might ask if it was going to rain. "Yes," I said. She nodded, taking that seriously. "My dad broke his wrist once. He said things hurt worse when you pretend they don't." "Your father is a smart man. He's okay," she said, with the breezy honesty only a 7-year-old can manage without cruelty. By the 3rd week, she'd made the chair her territory, arriving every afternoon with a new object of purpose in her hands. And something about the way she claimed a room reminded me, with a sharpness I wasn't prepared for, of Bug at that age. Not in looks, in the way she moved through a space and made it hers. One Tuesday she brought a small tin bank, dented, painted with faded stars, and set it on my tray table with a decisive clink. "This is for you, Nora. I can't take your savings." "It's not savings," she said, straightening with the dignity of someone correcting an important mistake. "Savings is when you're keeping it for something. I already decided, so now it's just money that needs somewhere to go." I stared at this child and her tin bank and her airtight logic and felt something behind my eyes. I refused to let become more than pressure. "What were you saving for?" A shrug. "Stuff. Doesn't matter. You need it more." I picked up the bank. It was heavier than I expected. "Thank you," I managed, and could not say more without my voice going somewhere I didn't want it to go in front of a child. She studied me, then said, "You're welcome, Grandpa Marcus," the way she might state the weather, like she'd been calling me that for years. I turned to the window so she wouldn't see, but she saw anyway, and she didn't say a word about it, which was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in months. By late summer, I could walk the hospital corridor without gripping the wall. The physical therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Rosalind, moved me from the wheelchair to a cane and told me plainly I had months of work left, but I'd earned that part. Priya's visits changed as I got stronger, less frequent but longer, and we started having real conversations, the kind where one person disagrees with the other and neither apologizes for it. She argued with me about a novel she'd finished. She had strong opinions delivered without apology, and something about the certainty of it nagged at the edge of my memory the way a word does when it sits just out of reach. It was the following week I noticed the row. Priya had set out my medication, 3 bottles lined up perfectly straight, evenly spaced, labels all facing the same way. "Did you arrange those?" I asked. She glanced at them, mildly puzzled. "I suppose I did. Is that strange? Do you always line things up?" She considered it honestly, the way she considered most things. "I think so. Danny teases me. Says I'd straighten the stars if I could reach them. Colleen used to say almost that exact thing. Arthur, the world has enough chaos without us adding to it at home." She alphabetized the spice rack. She straightened the books on my nightstand when she thought I wasn't looking. I drank my water slow, buying time for my face to settle into something that didn't need explaining. 3 days after that, adjusting my IV line, I saw it. The inside of her left wrist, pale in the afternoon light. A birthmark, oval, about the size of a thumbprint, sitting in the exact place and the exact shape of one I had last seen on a 3-year-old girl 28 years ago. My heart did not race. It stopped. "There is a difference." "Your wrist," I said, and my voice came out level in the way the body sometimes overrides the mind in a crisis. "Oh, this," she said, looking down. "Had it my whole life. Used to think it looked like a splotch. Nora says it looks like a leaf. Where were you born?" The question came out before I'd decided to ask it. She tilted her head. "I don't actually know for certain. My adoption records had gaps. The agency said paperwork got lost somewhere along the way. I've always just said Ohio, because that's where the agency was based, but I couldn't tell you for sure. Ohio. I looked at the window, at Portland going amber in the early evening, and I did not let myself name what I was thinking. I had been wrong about hope before. I was not certain I would survive being wrong again, but my hand went, without my permission, to the inside pocket of the jacket on the back of my chair, to the small, familiar weight that had rested against my ribs for 28 years, half of a silver locket, broken clean down the middle, the edge worn smooth from 1,000 nights of handling. The fever came in October, one of the secondary infections that burn recovery sometimes invites when the body lets its guard down. It spiked past 103 by midnight, and what I remember of that night comes in pieces, the way fever memories do. I remember calling a name into the dark, "Bug, where did you go, Bug?" And then nothing, until morning came pale through the blinds, and Priya was in the chair beside me, hands folded, watching my face with the particular stillness of someone who has been there a long while. "Who's Bug?" she asked. Quiet, direct, no preamble, the way she asked most things. My chest went tight. I had known this question was coming since the moment I heard my own voice say the name out loud. "My daughter," I said. "I had two. One I lost to a fire 2 months ago, in a manner of speaking. One I lost at a county fair outside Dayton 28 years ago. The silence that followed had weight to it. Priya didn't fill it with noise. She sat with it, the way she sat with everything difficult. She was 3, I said. Blue jumper. A stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed soft. I turned around for 30 seconds. When I turned back, she was gone. My voice was doing something I hadn't given it permission to do. Her name was Abigail. Colleen called her Bug from the week she was born. I never stopped looking, not once in 28 years. Priya's eyes had gone wet at the edges, something moving underneath the surface of her face. "When you said that name in your sleep," she said slowly, "it caught on something. I don't know why. I don't remember much from before the adoption. It's mostly a dark room, but there's a man's voice calling a name, and I've never been able to make out what it was. It's always just out of reach." I looked at the birthmark on her wrist, at the straight row of pill bottles, at the certainty in her voice that mirrored my late wife's exactly, and I made myself breathe. Not yet. I could not be wrong about this. I would not survive being wrong twice. The stuffed rabbit had survived the fire the way I had, badly damaged but breathing, one ear burned to nothing, fur scorched dark and brittle, tucked in my jacket pocket by pure habit, the way I'd carried it every day for 28 years. It sat now on a shelf in the small, furnished room the hospital placed me in when I moved to transitional housing that winter. Nora walked in on a Thursday, stopped dead when she saw it. "This is so weird," she whispered. "I feel like I've seen this before." "You haven't," I said. "It's been in my jacket since before you were born." "I know," she said, turning it over gently in her hands. "I just feel like I have." She sat on the end of my bed, a territory she'd claimed sometime in November, and asked, "The little girl you lost, Bug, do you think she's okay?" It hit me somewhere behind the sternum. "I do," I said. "I've always believed she was okay." Nora nodded slowly, satisfied. "Good," she said, with the simple finality of a child who considers the matter settled, and pulled out her homework. It was the next week Priya found me looking at a photograph I'd left out by accident. Bug on her 2nd birthday, cake on her face, both arms raised. Priya stopped in the doorway, and I watched something move across her face I couldn't fully read. "May I?" She held out her hand. She studied the photo a long time, her breathing changed, and then she raised her fingers to her own mouth, the way she's smiling. The left side goes up higher than the right. She touched the corner of her own mouth. "Mine does that." "I know," I said quietly. She looked up, eyes very bright, not wet yet, just alert, standing at the edge of something enormous. "Marcus, what aren't you telling me?" "I need you to go get something," I said. "Something you've kept since before the adoption." She didn't move for 3 full seconds. Then she left without a word and came back 7 minutes later with a small cloth pouch. I reached into my jacket and closed my hand around the half locket. I held it out. She opened the pouch, tipped the contents into her palm, a thin chain, half a locket broken clean down the middle. She held hers up. I held mine. Put them together, I said, my voice barely a sound. Her hand met mine. The two broken edges touched, and they locked, not approximately, not close enough, but exactly. The way things made as one fit back together, across 28 years and 1,000 miles. And every kind of loss, two people can carry alone, and not know they're carrying it together. Priya made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. Her knees went. I caught her arm. How long have you known? She whispered. Since August, I said. The birthmark, the way you line things up. Colleen used to make a chicken and dumpling soup nobody else ever got the recipe for. Nora told me you make one just like it and won't say where you learned it. I don't know where I learned it, Priya said, crying now, fully. The kind held back too long. I just always knew how. Your mother called you Bug from the day you were born, I said, my jaw shaking, and I let it. She never stopped believing you were alive. The last thing she ever said to me was, Marcus, I don't feel her gone. She died believing that. I'm so sorry I let go of your hand, I said. One moment, that's all it took. Stop, Priya said, fierce and immediate. You looked for me for 28 years. You kept my room. You kept the rabbit. You kept the chain. That's not something you apologize for. That's something you survived. I want to say something plain to whoever is listening tonight, because I think some of you have carried a version of this. I do not tell you this part for sympathy. I tell you because a rabbit with one burned ear and a woman's habit of lining up pill bottles gave me back something I thought the world owed me nothing more of. Hold on, because there is one more thing I have to finish. And it happened 2 years to the day after that fire, in a hotel ballroom in Dayton. And it involves my other daughter, and it involves a filing cabinet, and it involves everything I built with these two hands. 2 years after the fire, on the anniversary date Renee and Denny had chosen for a company celebration without realizing what day it actually was, I walked in the service entrance of the Dayton Marriott ballroom with Danny, Priya, and Nora beside me, and Rosalind's old physical therapy cane in my hand, though I barely needed it anymore. I'd spent the previous 9 months watching from a corner booth of a diner, 3 blocks from what used to be Feld, Feed, and Grain, now rebranded under Denny's name, watching him arrive at 8:50 every morning, never a minute early, and Renee arrived separately 40 minutes later. I'd talked to Gerald, my old operations manager, who told me over pie what he'd seen. Vendors swapped for companies nobody could find on paper, contracts signed in my name while everyone believed me dead, employees pressured into resigning and signing non-disclosures so they wouldn't ask questions. I had never been declared legally dead by any court, because doing so would have meant a probate hearing, and a probate hearing would have meant scrutiny neither of them wanted. 2 years of somebody else signing my name never once transferred what was legally mine. I stepped out from behind the curtain as the master of ceremonies called Renee up to celebrate the company's legacy, and the spotlight found me first, found the cane, the scars still visible above my collar, the face of a man everyone in that room believed was 6 feet under Ohio clay. The applause died like someone had cut a wire. Renee dropped the microphone. It struck the floor with a sound 300 people felt in their chests. I walked the center aisle without hurrying. When I reached the podium, I told them plainly what Feld, Feed, and Grain actually was. 31 years, 6 locations, built by people who showed up and did the work, not by one name on a sign. I told them I had documented every decision made in my name while I was presumed dead, and that those documents were already with the county recorder and the state licensing board, and that what happened next belonged to them now, not to me. I told them Danny Ostrowski would take over as director of operations because he'd earned it in a way that had nothing to do with whose name he was born under. I found Priya's hand and brought her up beside me and told 300 strangers that this was my daughter Abigail, that I'd called her Bug since the day she was born, that I'd lost her at a county fair when she was 3 and never once stopped looking, and I held up my half of the locket, and she held up hers, and we brought them together in front of everyone, the click of 2 decades of grief finally setting itself down. Priya broke completely, the way a person breaks when the weight finally has somewhere to go. Nora, from somewhere behind us, whispered, "Is Mom crying? Why is everyone crying?" And then, having gotten an answer from someone, a small, satisfied, "Oh, okay," I looked at Renee, standing with both hands, gripping the back of a chair. watching her sister's face for the first time in her life, watching the shadow she'd resented for 28 years turn out to have an actual face, an actual voice, an actual grief that had cost her something too. Renee's mouth opened and closed and nothing came out. And for the first time since the night she walked past me, carrying a document box, her face was entirely honest. Denny was looking at the exit. People have asked me since whether I felt satisfaction, standing at that podium. The honest answer is no, not satisfaction. Something quieter, the stillness that comes after a long walk when you finally stop moving and look around at where the walking brought you. I established a scholarship in Nora's name that week, for kids in Ohio with promise and not enough money, and the first thing it paid for was the piano lessons she'd quietly given up months earlier so her parents could help cover the costs. My insurance didn't, a fact I only learned by accident and that she'd never once mentioned. I did not do any of this out of anger. I did it because 31 years of work deserved to land in honest hands, and because a family, I have come to believe, is not the blood you were born connected to. It is the people who turn around and come back for you. If you are still with me tonight, here is what I would ask you to carry out of this story and into your own life, however that applies to you. Look at the people standing closest to you right now, tonight, and ask yourself honestly, which ones would run toward the fire for you, and which ones would run for the filing cabinet. Do not wait until your own house is burning to find out. I waited 68 years and lost time. I cannot get back to learn that lesson, and I would spare you that if I could. If some part of this reached you the way it reached me writing it down, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight, because I read every one of them, and I would like to know who's out there with me. And if you believe stories like this one matter, stay close, because there is always another one coming, and the truth in them tends to outlast whatever tries to bury it.